Welcome to Sunrise Life, the podcast where we have deep conversations with freelance models. And today I have Cheyanne on the line. Say hello.
Hi, everyone.
I'm so excited that we're doing this now because it was so great to meet you in real life in Utah. And you just seem like such a cool, nice person.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was an absolute delight. I'm really looking forward to dropping in with you today.
Heck yeah, this is awesome. We are on opposite sides of the planet from each other. So it's like 5 p.m. for me and like 10 a.m. for you right now. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So good.
And the toilet flushes the opposite direction, I guess.
Yeah. There's different stars and everything.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, let me start by asking you how you first got into modeling.
Sure. This is one I love sharing. So basically, I've always been really photogenic. I was my mother's firstborn, so I had a camera in my face from a very young age.
Yeah.
And either was just a natural or acclimatized to the camera very swiftly. And when I was 19, 20, I had a friend of mine who was an editor for an underground magazine, and she wanted to do an article about horror movies for chicks, of all things. And so she got a group of us girlfriends. There must have been about 20 of us. We all knew each other, and she got some really great TFP photographers and some special effects makeup artists, and we all dressed up as zombies. And we ran around the city, and we got all these photos, and we just had so much fun. And a few of us said afterwards, you know what, that was great. We should do more of that. And then a photographer reached out to me on Facebook. He'd done a shoot with one of my friends, and he was offering a deal at the time. I actually paid for my first solo shoot. So I paid $100 for a 5-hour shoot with 5 different costumes, and he had a costume room and everything. And, after that shoot, he sort of said to me, look, I'm not just trying to blow hot air up your skirt, but you seem like you have some idea of what you're doing. Like I have to direct you a little bit less than what I do some of the other absolute newbies. And I credit that probably to my dance background as well.
All right.
I was a ballet dancer and a jazz dancer as a child and into my teenage years. And so I think that really helped with just body awareness and posing. And then from there, that photographer told me about Model Mayhem. And so I joined Model Mayhem, and it kind of took off from there. And I remember very early on stumbling upon two of my absolute idols, Anne Duffy and Ivory Flame.
Nice.
And Anne Duffy, I'm very pleased to call one of my friends these days, and that's basically how I got into it all. And I can really thank Zombies and Model Mayhem and my mum's camera.
That's awesome. It sounds like the first few shoots that you had were like super creative and inspiring. So it's like a really good way to like get into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, I never dreamed for a moment that I would get paid for this. I never thought it would be my career. That's never why I got into it. I got into it for the love of it. As a child, I suppose I would say that I wasn't super creative in a traditional sense. Like I wasn't good at drawing. I wasn't good at music or anything like that. And when I found modeling, like I really feel like my physical expression is my canvas. It is my artwork. It is my creative expression to the world. And I really, really adore it.
That's awesome. And, that makes me think, I think a lot of people that I've interviewed have kind of a similar experience where they just kind of stumbled into modeling somehow and never assumed that they would be making an income at it. So maybe that's like the ticket. Like, you know how they say what you pursue eludes you? It's kind of a backwards.
That's right.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I do feel from my observations in the industry that those that get into it for the passion of it tend to do really well. And perhaps some of those people that get into it more for the money side of it, maybe their journey is a little bit different from what I've observed. And it's really not something. I remember the first time I ever got paid for a shoot. I was working TFP with this pair of photographers, and I don't know how they knew that I would be okay with nudity, but I grew up in a hippie household, so the human body's always been very natural to me. So maybe it's the case that maybe I would sort of just get changed in the studio near them without worrying about going to a bathroom or something. I'm not sure. But one day they asked me like, oh, how would you feel about doing half an hour of nudes at the end of our next shoot? And I said, sure, that sounds good. And so they got a makeup artist in and I felt like a real model and, I had a really fun shoot. And afterwards, it was TFP. They handed me $50 and I was just falling all over myself. I was like, oh my goodness, you're too kind. You really shouldn't. And they said, well, no, like, if you're getting nude, like there should be some sort of, remuneration for that, which I thought was, really, really decent of them to do that. Yeah.
That's cool. So when you were doing those nude photos initially, were you ever concerned about like anything about getting judged about the nudity or them being on like that?
Yeah. So my main concern was actually around like my family and how my family would respond to it. I was less concerned about friends. And I remember when I first showed my dad my portfolio, I was so nervous. And I showed him, and my dad is a man of few words. And afterwards, I was like, "So, what do you think? Like, is it better or worse than you sort of expected?" He said, "Well, no, like it's about what I expected." And he just gave me some sound advice that really resonated for me at the time. I was 21 when I showed him my portfolio, and he said, "Look, I just think that there's potential that it could be a slippery slope. So, like, maybe just feel into where your boundaries are going to be." And that really stuck with me. And so I really did feel into that. I was like, okay, like if I am going to go down this path, I am still quite young. What boundaries do I want to create so that I can ensure that when I'm older, I don't look back with any regret? So I found that really helpful.
Well, that
Yeah.
was really nice, and I wasn't expecting that from your dad. I mean, I don't know.
I know. What a guy.
But, I mean, that's really important. It could be a slippery slope, and if you're slightly uncomfortable with something, but then you get used to doing it, then it's really easy to, like, move on to the next more graphic thing,
That's right.
So that is super good advice, and
Yeah.
especially when people are offering you money, it's
Yeah.
the slipperier slippery slope.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And so it was just, really comforting to have that positive experience with my dad. And then I'm now at the point where my entire family knows about what I do. Like I'm not into secrets. And for my mum, she was super cool with it. And even my grandparents know about it. My grandfather, actually both of my grandfathers were photographers. And so I had interesting conversations with each about the career that I've chosen for myself. And my grandmother was right into it. She used to take, just for fun, some nude photos herself when she was younger. And so she's actually really enjoyed over the course of my career. Every now and then I'll print off a bunch of photos for her and just send them over to her. And she really enjoys viewing them, which, I'm reflecting now, being able to share this now on the podcast, just how unique and beautiful that is to be able to do that.
Yeah, totally. My grandma loved my stuff too. She wanted to see my nudes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you started a Model Mayhem, things started picking up for you, and you showed your portfolio to your dad, and he told you that it could be a slippery slope and that you needed to set boundaries. Was there like a time where you were like, oh my gosh, my boundaries really need to be set now? Like was there any like trigger for that to occur? Like, did anybody try to cross your boundaries before you knew how to set them?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. And so it's hard to say exactly when the moment was, but I did decide that for my own boundaries, that I didn't want to do open leg shots. And my reasoning behind that was, you know what, there's already so much of my body and so much of my feminine essence available online all over the place for anyone to view. And I felt like I wanted something to be just private, just for me, and something to be just private and just for myself and whoever my partner might be at the time. So that's definitely a boundary that I have stuck to throughout my career. And then outside of that, in terms of boundaries in general being pushed by photographers, I have some stories, fortunately not as awful as some stories that my colleagues have shared with me. But I do have one example of a story when I had just started charging for modeling, and I was working with a photographer who had hired a service department, and we were shooting, and he would pause very often to take breaks and just chat. And I didn't really know how things worked at that point. I just started out. And at some point I said to him, look, I just want to, just make sure that we're shooting enough because I can't stay beyond the time that we've set. And he said, oh, no, this is just how I like to shoot. I just like to, enjoy the time with the model. I was like, okay, no problem. Completely naive. And then at some point he said, you're a really good model. And alarm bells should have started going off, really. I said, oh, thank you. And he said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to offer you something I don't offer all the models. And there I am going, great. Okay, what's that? And he said, well, it's something called POV photography.
Oh, God.
And I had no idea what this meant. I just walked right into it. And I was like, oh, I don't actually know what that is. What is it? And please excuse my language here, but he said straight up, he's like, oh, it's where I fuck you and I photograph it from above. And that's exactly it. I just started laughing, like genuine laughing. It wasn't even just nervous laughter. I was just laughing. And I was like, wow, yeah, no, you've definitely got the wrong model there. I'm not interested.
Oh, my God, dude.
And then this guy turns around. He's like, oh, it pays more. And I was like, I bloody hope it does. Like,
Jesus
what
Christ,
a clown. Dude. And it's interesting when I reflect on this story because I just started out and I wasn't firm on my boundaries, and I'm a pretty chill person. Like it takes a lot to offend me. And so actually in that moment, once I made it clear I wasn't interested, he left it alone and we kept shooting. And I actually was comfortable for the rest of the shoot. It was no problem. And reflecting now, like if that happened to me these days, I would say what I would have to say and I would probably leave.
Yeah. Totally.
I would make it really clear that that wasn't okay, but I just didn't have that available to me at the time. I wasn't developed enough in myself as a person and in my vocation as a model. I didn't have those words.
Yeah. And even if you are like feeling like you've set your boundary and that you're going to be fine because they're not going to cross your boundary again, that person is going to try that with the next model that they're working with. And they probably have a history of pushing boundaries. And you don't want to be in those people's portfolios because
that's right.
If you are, then it's basically condoning that behavior.
Mm-hmm. It's basically a referral or a reference. Yeah, and it wasn't until years later that when I reflected on that story that I actually got angry.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I had that realization of like, wait a minute, I was this, young girl that, really, really could have used the money. Like, what about all the other young, vulnerable girls?
Yeah.
That would have just said yes because they needed the money.
Yeah.
And that's when I got angry, was on behalf of other women that would have to deal with situations like that.
Yeah. But, like kind of going back to what you were saying before, like when you first started modeling, you really never thought that this would be your full-time career. So when you're getting paid work, you're still feeling like you're a nobody. You don't mean anything to the industry. Like, why would it matter if somebody like made you feel uncomfortable? You still made $500 or whatever. Because, but then it's like hindsight's 2020. Once you've built a name for yourself and you're recognizable online, then you can look back and be like, oh shit, I work with all these predators. And
100%. Yeah. Wow. The industry is rife with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And, I cringe at a lot of the behavior that I, dealt with and, people that I worked with in the past that I now, especially when you work with somebody a bunch and then you find out later that they did a bunch of fucked up shit.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of the pitfalls of the industry.
Yeah. Talk about photo shoot fail of the week. We already busted out with one of the crazy stories. Surprise, the bonus POV because you're such a great model. Oh my
God.
Like, it sounds like he thought really hard in advance about, okay, how do I phrase this question so that she thinks it's a good idea?
Absolutely. And looking back, I think he was sort of trying to groom the setting as well, because looking back, I remember that he was making all sorts of comments about how much money he had. Like he would keep having to leave the room, and he was telling me that he, kept having to leave the room to jump on these calls for some car that he was buying, and I couldn't even tell you what one it was. Like, I am not a car person. He picked the wrong topic to try and woo me with. If he'd chosen cheese, it might have been a different story, but cars, no. And he was trying to be a big shot, telling me that he owned the factory that provides the clothing for Big W. I don't know if you have that in the States, but it's bit like Target. Do you have Target?
Oh,
The
yeah, we have
clothing store?
Target.
Yeah. So he's like, I actually own the factory that provides to Big W. I was like, wow, big shot. Good for you.
Oh, my God, dude. I don't know.
Incredible. I hope he's listening to this. Hi, if you're listening. Hope
I
you've changed your ways.
I hope that there are creepy photographers that hear a story that they did. Actually, that has happened. Somebody has reached out to me saying, "Oh, that story was about me."
Oh, wow. I was wondering that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but we never say names on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
However, if somebody DMs me and they're like, "Who is that about?" Like we share safety informations. If you're worried about like somebody booking with you, it's important to know who did what. We can't
That's
say
right.
it publicly, but we could say it privately.
That's right. It's of paramount importance, and something that I'll name publicly here as well, if it's not already known, that simply seeing my photograph in a photographer's portfolio doesn't mean that I actually would give them a good reference to work with. So it's always worth reaching out to any models that you see in someone's portfolio, whether they're a super well-known model or not so much, to actually find out what their experience was.
Yes, absolutely. And something that I've, in the last couple of years, been realizing is that just because they have a lot of experienced models in their portfolio, it probably means that they treated those experienced models nicely so that they could get a portfolio that looks like they're legit. That they can use that legit portfolio to bait a newer model who's like,
That's
"Oh, I
right.
see so many models I look up to in your portfolio." And then they like surprise that model by pulling some shit at the shoot.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. And unfortunately, as we know, yeah, photographers can treat different models in very different ways. And so it's always worth doing at least 3 reference checks, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really important.
Yeah. Also, when they have models in their portfolio that I don't recognize that look like they might be novice, I always look for the micro expressions if they look like they're afraid or they want to get out of there.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, this guy was freaking her out.
that's right. It amazes me sometimes to see the photographs that some photographers willingly post, because I assume because they think it's a good photo. And you can see the expression on the model's face, and you can see that they are just so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Blows my mind. Yeah.
totally. So, since we're still on the kind of crazy photo shoot story kick right now, do you have any other crazy photo shoot stories that you wanted to tell?
Oh, I mean, I have so many. But I suppose the main one that I will share, and I will try to condense it because it is a little bit of a long story, is the one that I actually shared with you in Utah. Basically, I went to go shoot many, many years ago. I think it was maybe my first Sydney tour. And yeah, I went to shoot with this photographer, and as soon as he picks me up, we're in the car and he's describing to me his perfect model, and he's describing a very thin, platinum blonde, spray tan, enhanced breasts, and he's describing this to me, and I'm listening to him, and I'm looking at myself and I'm thinking, why have you booked me? Like, I'm very clearly not that kind of model. And so off we go to the photo shoot, and he, hands down, has to be one of the worst photographers that I've actually worked with in terms of technique throughout the shoot. Like, he would get me to put on an outfit and then stand in one spot and then turn slowly in a circle one way and then turn slowly in a circle the other way. And then more than once he would say, oh, let's just do it again in case I missed it. And he did not take his finger off that shutter. So it's just the same photo over and over and over again. And I was pretty well over it. But I also realized that my shoot after this one, I realized the guy was ghosting me. This is back when I didn't get deposits and didn't know what I was doing.
Oh.
And so I said to this guy, look, like it looks like the guy I meant to shoot with after this is just ghosting me. Like, do you want to extend the shoot? Because I actually really needed the money at that point, you know?
Yeah.
And so he haggled me down on my rate.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up agreeing. And so we went and got some lunch after our first shoot, took the lunch to his house, ate the lunch at his house. And then when we finished eating lunch, in my mind, I started the clock again. And he's showing me around his house and showing me all of his possessions. And eventually he says, oh, wait till you see the next room. You're going to love the next room. And I'm thinking, my God, it's going to be. Thankfully, it wasn't a dungeon-esque kind of place. We walked in and it was just filled with women's clothing. And we're talking like your cheap eBay, Australia flag bikinis, you know, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Exactly my cup of tea. And he's expecting me to be really impressed. And so I acted kind of impressed. And yeah, he asked me to pick out some favorite items. So I did. And he says, oh, you can keep them. I said, oh, no, that's okay. Like, we can shoot with them, but you can keep your clothing. He says, oh, I thought it could be part of your payment. And I was like, no, I'll take the cash, thanks. Like, I don't want the cheap bikinis. And so we keep shooting, and at least twice he tried to cross a boundary asking if I would shoot with handcuffs, and I kept having to say, no, I'm not interested in that.
God.
And then at one point he had one of those awful metal bird aviary cage things, you know, the really boring stock standard silver metal bird cages, no birds in it. He says, oh, do you want to pose in this? By this point, I'm so over it. I'm just like, sure, you can photograph me wherever. I don't even care anymore. And so I get into this bird cage and he closes the door behind me and he says, don't worry, I'm not going to lock it. And my first thought is, it's okay, the neighbors could hear me from here. And that's not a good thought to have when you're on a photo shoot. And look, I genuinely think that perhaps he was on the spectrum, or perhaps he just didn't know how to interact socially. I think he genuinely was harmless, but I was uncomfortable. And so we get to the end of the shoot. I'm so glad it's over. He's offered to drive me back to where I was staying. And so I'm trying to hurry him along so I can get to the shops before they close. He says, oh, it's okay, I can take you to the shop. I said, okay. And then he's spending so much time on the computer, allegedly trying to find the model release, but he's actually just opening folders of other models that he's worked with and showing me all his work with these. Oh, my God. And we're talking, you know, his ideal model. So the peroxide blonde hair and the spray tan and, you know, and I was like, okay, this is great. Can we get the form and sign it? Finally, he does that. Wait. After I signed it and handed it to him, he says, oh, look, I want to ask you something, but I don't really know how to say it because I really don't want to offend you, but it's really important to me. And I was like, okay, you can just, you know, spit it out. Like, what is it? He says, oh, I would love to shoot you a bikini on the beach next time. So, okay, that's no problem. We can do that. He says, oh, it's just that I'm not willing to pay your full rate for that. I was like, okay, that's fine. We don't have to shoot bikini on the beach then. Like, what do you want me to say? You know, he's already been negotiating me down all day and then he's ending with this. And I was like, I was just over it. And I said, no, that's fine, but then we won't shoot bikini. And I think he was a bit surprised by the answer and didn't really know what to do with that. But he left it alone and off we go. And we go to the grocery store where I picked up some bits and pieces to make dinner that night. And he goes through the counter and he pays for his items. And then I put my items through and he says, no, don't worry. I've got this. And he pays for my groceries, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know whether he was trying to impress me. I don't know whether he was trying to impress the checkout chick. I'm not sure what was going on there, but it was very strange after haggling me down all day. Mm-hmm. And then we get in the car and I had done a reference check. And it actually turns out later on that the model had mixed up two different photographers. So I'd gotten a different photographer. But yeah, so we're in the car and I started talking to him about, you know, this other model. And he was telling me that day was actually a really hard day. I was like, okay. He said, well, yeah, I'd booked her and her friend and was paying her and her friend. But then they had this third friend there that was happy to jump in for free. And I'm thinking, okay, sounds pretty good. And he says, yeah, then we got to the end of the 2 hours and they were happy to just keep shooting, for free. I was like, okay, still sounds pretty good. And then he says, yeah, but eventually got to the point where I was really tired and I didn't know how to tell them that I was tired, and they kept coming out in outfit after outfit, which sort of also makes me think that perhaps there's something on the spectrum or something similar going on there if he wasn't able to actually say like, hey, like I'm actually, finished with the shoot now.
Yeah.
And then the icing on top was that he says, yeah, and then at the end of the day, I felt really bad for them. So I bought them some groceries.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there with my bag of groceries on my lap, looking at the groceries, looking at him, and I'm just speechless. I'm like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to take from the situation. So he dropped me off, and needless to say, I never shot with him again. And yeah, that's got to be one of the strangest experiences I've had.
Yeah, so it's like, do you feel bad for me? Is that why you bought me groceries?
I mean, that's the only thing I can take from that, but I still wonder sometimes what happened there and what was going through his mind. Yeah, very strange.
Yeah. Very strange. Yeah, that's like nothing bad happened. The whole thing sounds like overall just somewhat awkward,
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
Modeling is like that sometimes. Like
it is.
It's like you have to navigate all these different personality types.
Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember a shorter story. I remember another time at a group shoot, a photographer came along and I knew him, again, maybe on the spectrum or something, but I knew him as someone that would sometimes come out with just strange comments. And so I was a bit nervous that he was even at the group shoot. And at one point when we're sort of swapping photographers and models, my model friend said to him like, oh, so how do you want me? And as soon as she said it, I was like, oh no, this is not going to be a good response. And he straight up in a joking voice says, well, if it was up to me, I'd be raping and pillaging you. And everyone was just in dumb silence.
Oh my God, dude.
And again, it was very early on and we didn't really know how to, I would react very differently these days to something like that. But there was just the nervous laughter and just getting on with it at that point. Yeah, just awful.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what he was thinking. He wasn't thinking.
Or he was thinking and that's what he wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a very strange individual.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damn. The bear.
Yeah. I mean, I've got lots of stories, but they're probably some of the main ones that come to mind. I've got a couple of great stories in terms of like interesting things that have happened on a shoot.
Let's hear it.
Like to balance these things out. So one of my dear favorite photographers that I've worked with for about a decade now, I was shooting at a national park with him, and he says to me like, oh, there's something really weird around the corner I think you might like to shoot with. And because I know him well, I'm like, great, this is going to be awesome, whatever it is. We go around the corner and there is a piano on a cliff.
Wow.
On the edge of the cliff. I've never seen anything like it. We don't know how it got there. It was gone a few days later. We just happened to be there at the right time. Unfortunately, it was raining and he's very into his safety. So he wouldn't let me actually climb up on it, which was totally fair enough. But I was able to pose in front of it. And it was just one of those magical moments where I just had such appreciation for this weird and wonderful industry that I found myself in, that we can have moments like that to be able to create in nature with a piano on a cliff.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if somebody else was using it for like a music video or something.
I would assume so. Yeah. And then it was just someone saw it in my story and tried to go and shoot with it a few days later and it was gone.
Wow. That's crazy cool.
Yeah, just incredible.
Was it like a up and down piano or like a grand piano?
I don't know what an up and down piano is, but it wasn't a grand piano, so I guess it was an up and down piano.
I don't know the correct term for it.
Me neither.
The piano that you can fit in most any room that's kind of up against the wall versus like the big, long, flat ones.
Yeah, no, I think it was an up and down piano. I'll try and find one of the photos and maybe I'll try and post one on my Insta soon for anyone that's curious. You can go and have a look.
That's cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
so good. And then one other story that I'd love to share is, very early on, I accepted a TFP shoot for a concept that I absolutely loved. And when I rocked up to shoot with him and we're getting to know each other, I said, look, your name's actually really familiar to me. And he said, oh, what school did you go to? And I told him, and he says, oh, I photographed your school ball. I was like, no way. And at the time when I was at school, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so I'd only gotten 1 or 2 photos from that night. And that day, many, many years later, he let me just go onto his hard drive and just take all the photos that I wanted.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was such a gift. It was so, so beautiful. Yeah.
So is that like the prom?
Yeah. Essentially, prom. There I was in my big ball gown. It's fabulous.
Nice. That's so cool. How random is that, though?
I know. And that same ball gown, I keep thinking of more and more stories. That same ball gown I wore around that same time for an underwater shoot on a cold day in an unheated pool where I wore my ball gown and used an anchor as a prop. And after the shoot, the photographer said, oh, the water quality was off that day. I actually can't give you any of the photos. I'll have to do it again.
Oh, shit.
So this is some of the pitfalls when you're doing TFP in the early days. And my opinion is that he should have, as per our agreement of TFP, he should have still given me a few of those photos. But he was one of those photographers that refused to edit anything. It all had to be in camera. And I'm still salty about that. My ball gown and my anchor at the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, what the heck? Like, maybe he could have just gone down there and tested the conditions before, like, going through with the whole shoot. Like,
you know what's so funny? I never thought of that. I always focused on that. Couldn't you have just edited it a little bit to make it something that you'd be okay with me sharing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you can get around that kind of stuff, like less than ideal conditions. It could just be a little bit foggy, you know, which would be cool. But
yeah, not happy, Jen.
Yeah. Hey, you know, I mean, that's why, like, we have once you have all this experience, you know what to ask for in advance, but you don't know what to ask for when it comes to trade agreements until you've been burned a bunch of times.
That's right. Yeah. Luckily, I wasn't burned too many times, but that was probably the most major one. Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks. That sucks big time. I remember I did a video shoot on a trade basis with like this team of 2 videographer guys, and they did really wicked editing, and like I really liked the way they edited their trippy sexy videos. And so the second time I worked with them, I split the cost of the Airbnb with them, and we shot for like 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then later on, I'm like, all right, so how's the editing going? It's been a while now. And the guy finally got back to me and he said, I'm sorry, I had a nightmare that like Satan was trying to take my soul, and it's because I've been like doing these salacious videos with other women, and I'm married and my wife is about to have a baby, and I feel like Satan is coming after my soul because I'm into this like dirty video business. And
wow.
In the dream, Satan was trying to burn his eyes out or something like that.
Oh my God.
I can't edit the footage. And I was like so offended that I didn't respond for a while. And then I finally did respond. I was asking if he could just transfer the footage to me and I could edit it, but he didn't get back to me after that. I was super, super annoyed.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the most creative and flowery sort of reasons that I've heard for not honoring TFP agreements. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that sucked. And those ones were so cool too. They were so inspiring. Like they inspired me when it came for me buying my own videography equipment, and I kind of modeled my editing style after how they did theirs. Like I thought they were so cool. It's so inspiring. And so to get that email, I was like, kidding me?
What a bummer.
Super huge bummer. I hope you're listening.
That's awful.
They probably wouldn't listen to us dirty, satanic models talking anyway. So whatever.
Probably not. I think you're in the clear.
Dang. I want to take a short little break to tell you about Model Society. ModelSociety.com is a website dedicated to featuring figurative fine art photography for models and photographers. What makes them different than other portfolio hosting websites is that some of those other websites will still host kind of tacky photography or exploitative photos. Model Society screens all of their contributors for quality and authenticity. So you only get the best of the best on there. If you're not a photographer or model, you can still enjoy and appreciate Model Society because they also have newsletters and magazines featuring their best work and new articles each week. Check it out, modelsociety.com. I will also include a link to Model Society in the show notes. All right, now back to our show. So I have another question that I also ask everybody on the show, and I call it the rising phoenix era of your life. Can you describe a situation where you were faced with some kind of a challenge that you had to overcome?
I mean, certainly there have been many in my lifetime, but in terms of specifically around modeling, I suppose there's a couple that come to mind. One is that I really, really had to back myself when I first got into this. Like, yes, I knew I loved it, but like I said, I never thought it would be my career. And then once it started going that way, I sort of had to make a decision whether I was going to really back myself in terms of my confidence in my ability. Because from my perspective, I've got a couple of things about me physically that can make it really challenging in the modeling industry. And some people are going to laugh when they hear this because I have shared this with some people. One is that I can't actually point my feet.
What?
Yeah. So basically, I've got basically no arch in my foot, or like a very low arch in my foot. And so I actually can't point my feet properly. And it has been a sore spot for me for my entire life. It's actually why I stopped ballet, because I couldn't go on point. And yeah, it's been something where I've even had photographers that know me well, one or two, sort of make a joke about it. They're like, oh, can you just point your foot? I'm like, mate, you know that I am. Like, you know that I'm trying. And so I've got that sort of slight setback, I suppose. Like, I love my feet, but that has been a setback. And the other is my back. Like, I actually have a problem with my lower back where the coccyx and the sacrum didn't fuse when I was born. So I actually don't have any mobility in my lower back. And it means, for example, that I can't do that beautiful back curve that a lot of models can do. It means that I can't do things like cartwheels because I can't sort of like hinge at that point in my back. And it does impact my posing. And so I had to sort of make a decision that I was going to really go for it, even though I knew I had these two things that might make it a bit more challenging for me. And I still sometimes look at where I'm at and I'm really pleased that I've been able to make it this far with those couple of little setbacks physically. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, did I, like, ask you to point your feet when we
I
were
don't think so.
I don't remember it being an issue, but
No, I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're all our own biggest critics.
yeah.
And I certainly notice it in photos, and I'm sure some other people do, but I'm sure not everyone notices it as much as I do.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I've got a couple of, fellow models who just have the most exquisitely pointed feet. And sometimes when I see their photos and I'm exclaiming about their photos to some friends of mine going, look how beautiful this is, look at their feet. I must sound like I'm really into feet sometimes, but that's not what the goal is. It's just me, part of me comparing their feet to mine.
That's funny.
Oh, good.
But
Yes,
you adapt,
that's
right?
one.
Like, you use, like, your body, like, the more you pose in front of the camera, the more you know what works. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah, for sure. So that was one of the rising phoenix moments. And then I suppose another is also when I started my modeling agency. So I run a modeling agency called Lanu. And when I first actually went and did like a business course to learn how to do this fully above board and properly, one of the assignments was to actually do some market research. And when I started looking around for other fine art nude agencies in Australia, I realized that there weren't any. And I had a real moment of panic, actually, was one of the initial feelings, because I realized I was trying to break into something that hadn't been done before in Australia. And I started having all these doubts come up, being like, is there a reason that this doesn't already exist? Is this going to be too hard to do? Like, how am I supposed to set a standard for this if it's not something that's been done before? And yeah, I moved through that with the help of friends and fellow models who have been so supportive and sent me lots of ideas and everything like that. And now the agency is, fully fledging. It's 5 years later, about that officially. And it's going really well. And so I'm really pleased that I pushed on through and really backed myself in that moment. The agency is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm really passionate about supporting new models through mentoring, and also supporting models that want to be touring and doing it safely so they don't have some of the experiences like I've described earlier.
Really?
And it's something I really wish was available when I started out. And so I'm really passionate about being able to bring that to Australia.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I remember you talking about that when we were hanging out a couple months ago. And so I feel like I have a good understanding of how your agency works just through those other conversations we had. But for people listening that don't know anything about it, can you describe like how that got going in the beginning, and then what exactly you do to help models get bookings?
Yeah, sure. So I've actually got a beautiful close friend of mine to thank for me actually beginning it at all. She used to model, and we would model together, and we did 1 or 2 duo tours. And then one day she messaged me and she said, babe, like, would you just like be my Virgo and just like organize my next tour? And I just said to her, like, oh, look, I don't know. And the main reason I said I don't know is because I had no idea what I should charge for something like that. And then she actually came back to me with a number. She's like, what if I gave you 20%? And I
Ooh.
said, okay, like, all right, like, I'll give that a go. And oh, so much love to my younger self. I was so nervous when I first started doing it. I remember sending out messages to photographers, like with like basically an essay being like, look, my friend has asked me to represent her, but we want you to rest assured that we haven't raised her rates to like cover my commission or anything like that. Like, just explaining all the ins and outs of it, which was pretty unnecessary. But
Yeah.
I suppose that was my way of trying to go about it with some integrity. And that's basically how it started. And so I was doing it casually just for friends for, I'd say, a year or two. And then I thought, you know what, I could actually make a business out of this. So I went and did the NICE program, something the Australian government offers to help people start new small businesses. And it took off from there. And so basically the way it works is I've got mentoring. That's one side of the business. And so anyone that's sort of just gotten into the fine art nude industry, or that is curious about it, even photographers. I've even done mentoring for a couple of photographers around how to speak to models and such. And so I offer like a one-off mentoring session where I basically just give them all the basics, and they're welcome to book subsequent sessions with me if they want to, but I really aim to give them everything they need in that first session to really empower them and give them the confidence to go out and start building their own portfolio. And I'll give them a list of trusted, verified photographers in their major Australian city to go and start building this portfolio with. And that's been really, really wonderful. And I've had some great feedback from that. And then on the other side of it, I actually have the agency where I represent models across Australia for tours around Australia. And so basically, if they come and join up, I'll pop them on the website and I do all of their promo for them. I am their official Virgo organizing their tours. Cool. And they'll just get a calendar from me with all of the shoots, all of the details, and I put them in direct communication with the photographers about a fortnight out, and they go out and they know that they're going to be going and creating with safe photographers, and they know that they're going to be having some really incredible shoots. And yeah, it's been a really wonderful journey sort of building the agency, and it's now at the point where for some years now I just have people reaching out to me. I'm not actually having to go out there and search for people. So that's been really encouraging, and I've had some great feedback on it all. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to offer something like that to new models. I think it's important.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and it makes me wonder though, did you have any issues with like the government or whatever because your industry involves nudity?
Great question. You know what? I actually had a very small amount of issue with that. When I was doing the niece program only, that's where the issue came up. So when I submitted my final business plan, they knew full well, I was very upfront, I'm not secretive at all. They knew full well, my teacher, that I was running a fine art nude agency specifically. And then when I submitted the final proposal, they said, look, you're actually going to have to remove the word nude. I was like, okay, well, this is a surprise to me. Like, you're very aware. And they were very supportive and said, look, we're supportive of what you're doing, but we know how the government works and we don't think it's going to pass if you use that word. And so
Mm,
when I heard about it, and the good thing about being a niche industry is no one has any idea what we're doing on the outside.
yeah.
So we actually just used the words fine art in place of nude, and it passed through completely fine, and it was true and accurate. So that's how I got around that.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a good workaround for that.
Yeah, it worked out really well. Yeah,
Cool.
but no, outside of that, we don't have any issue because all of the models are actually subcontractors anyway. They're not employees. So there's a lot of hoops that I didn't have to jump through because
Oh,
of that.
great. That's
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love
Mhm.
that you're doing that, and that it sounds like you came from, like, a super, like, down to earth approach because you were already helping your friends
Yeah.
their tours, and you're like, "Well, I might as well help other people that aren't just my, like, good friends." And
Absolutely.
that's really refreshing because I do see other people starting up their own agencies or, like, online courses, and they have, like, questionable motives or
Um,
questionable content, and, like, gosh, like, not that
um,
everybody that starts, like, a online course or an agency does, but I feel like there's a lot of people that are kind of advantageous when it comes to that sort of a thing because they're like, "Oh, I can make money off of other people's work." But it sounds like
well,
you're coming from, like, a really legitimately, like, down to earth space.
yeah. I mean, I certainly like to think so. And at the end of the day, it's because I'm so passionate about the industry and I'm so passionate about model rights. And I'm equally passionate about photographer rights as well. And I think it's something that sometimes we forget to talk about. And I think it's a really important part of the conversation. And the industry is the agency is a really great way of bridging those because I am essentially the mediator between the two and really ensuring that I'm doing what's best for all parties involved. And in terms of the beginnings of it all, you've reminded me as well that with the mentoring side of things, I used to completely unofficially mentor quite a few models. And I would just, meet up with a friend of a friend who wanted to get into the industry. I would just meet up with them and have a cup of tea and basically tell them all about it and how to get into it. And then after a while, as life started getting busier, I realized, and I actually really grappled with it because I realized that I wanted to keep doing that for people, but I didn't have the time anymore to be doing it for free.
Mhm.
And so I really grappled with that, and I had a bit of an ethical thing come up around like, well, I still want to be doing this, but I feel bad charging for it. And I really had to, move through some stuff around that and to actually really recognize and value my worth and what I actually have to offer and just ensuring that I've kept it at a sustainable price so that it's still accessible for people.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
I feel that too because, like, the wisdom and the knowledge that you grow over all the years that it takes for you to, like, get this experience, it does have value, and I
Mm.
have also done, like, a bunch of free mentoring, and I've had
Man.
people take advantage of me for that too and, like, not
Mm.
take my advice and then blame me when they're not getting successful.
Ooh, that's hard. Yeah.
Oh, man, yeah, a couple just one that was, like, really bad, but, like, the people that have taken the information and then ran with it and, like, did everything that I said was a good idea, like, a lot of them did well, but
Yeah.
it's like,
Likewise.
if you don't take the advice and do the work, then it's not gonna work for you.
Right. That's right. And like at the end of the day, this job is not just rocking up and taking your clothes off. There's
Yeah.
a lot involved. There's a lot involved. Yeah.
Totally.
Mm.
So, like, do you have certain criteria for like representing somebody? Like, do they already have to have some modeling experience?
Great question. Yeah. So for the mentoring itself, they don't need any experience, but mentoring does not mean that they'll automatically be able to join the agency by any means.
Yeah.
And in terms of the agency, at the end of the day, I am a one-man band, a one-woman band. And so, like I said, I'm not out there searching for people, and I'm only considering people that reach out to me. And so my criteria, it's actually pretty minimal. So my criteria, one, they have to have an established portfolio, like a fairly well-established fine art nude portfolio. And at the end of the day, I personally also just need to like their work. And that might sound subjective, but at the end of the day, it is subjective. But I also know I've been in the industry for long enough that I feel, and others may disagree, but I feel that when I look at a model's portfolio, I can get a feel as to whether they have enough experience and whether they will be able to be successful in the industry. And where I think that maybe they're not at that point, I try to really lovingly and politely let them know, and to also say, look, I also do offer mentoring. But even in those moments where I'm trying to be honest in that, there is still a part of me that comes up hoping that they don't get offended by that.
Yeah.
And my intention behind offering the mentoring is genuinely wanting to help them out. But then sometimes I worry that if people get that message back, they might just think that I'm just trying to get money out of them. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, to be totally honest, that's one of the things that I face running an agency.
Yeah. Because it puts you in the gatekeeper position, just like naturally. That's like they're coming to you because they want you to represent them, but you have to be confident that the photographers in your network are going to want to hire them. Otherwise, it's not going to work out for them. If if all the photographers are like, oh, she's not like my type of model for whatever reason, you kind of know what your clients like, and you know if that model is going to book up, probably.
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration as well. And then some other considerations are also age. Like, of course, this needs to be 18 plus, but I actually had an 18-year-old reach out who didn't really have a portfolio. And I just lovingly sort of expressed to them, like, look, if you really want to do this, I do want you to do it safely. So I would offer you the mentoring, but it's my strong recommendation that you actually come back to me when you're 21. And that's just an age that I pulled out of a hat. You know what I mean? Like I started at 21, really, doing nudes. But I do feel that while it's legal at 18, I feel, still very young. And so personally, I just feel more comfortable mentoring or representing someone that's at least 21.
Yeah. And if they're 18, maybe they can like just work on building their portfolio and then end up getting some. But the mentoring would definitely be like probably a good route even at that age.
Yeah.
Would you mentor somebody at 18 or?
Yeah, I did offer to that person that I was willing to, but I didn't hear back, and that happens sometimes as well, and that's okay. Yeah. I don't make it mean anything, Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then, of course, one of the other criteria is, of course, I do a reference check. If they have been working with photographers, I'll check in with those photographers. Like, hey, what's this person like to work with?
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Because for me, it's I also have a Zoom sort of, I suppose it's an interview, but it's very informal and very casual, and I make that very clear to them. I just want to get a feel for their energy. Yeah. For me, it's really important that I'm working with people where it feels in alignment and when it feels like where we have similar values and that it's going to be a really symbiotic working relationship for both of us. And I've had, a few times we've done the Zoom session and for whatever reason, we've discovered that actually maybe it's not totally a match. And I absolutely lovingly send them on their way and just, fully support them in their continued career and stay in touch with them around that. And yeah, I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. And that's kind of making me think about how at the very beginning of this podcast, you said that when you first started, you were just modeling because you really loved it. You never thought you were going to get like paid for it. So that I'm assuming that element, at least to some degree, has to be there in the models that you
Definitely.
present. They have to enjoy the process of
That's
the
right.
photo shoot, not just the part where they get paid.
100%. And that's basically the first question I asked them as well. It's like, how did you get into this and how are you finding it? And just sort of, feel into what their response is and go from there.
Yeah, right. Like if
Mm.
they hate all photographers and they're just in it for the money,
Yeah.
it's not going to be great.
No, that's right. And like I said, I do this for the models, but I'm also doing it for the photographers that book them through me. I want to see, I started this agency because I want to connect like minded creatives and I get excited to see what they create together. So, of course, I'm going to do everything that I can to ensure that that's the standard that's upheld and that we're really connecting people that are really in it for the art.
Yeah, that's awesome. Heck yeah. And
Yeah.
so is it mostly models that are based out of Australia that you represent?
Yeah, yeah. So it is. Yeah, I would love to take it international, but that seems really challenging for a number of reasons. But yes, I represent people within Australia. I can represent anyone that's here on a working visa, but unfortunately, I've had a few models reach out that are looking to be represented where they don't have that, and it makes me really sad that I can't represent them because it's not
Yeah.
above the Australian government, and I just can't risk it for the
I know.
agency.
Yeah.
But I've had some fantastic models reach out asking, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I actually can't," you know?
Yeah. That's definitely a sore topic.
Yeah, it
Like,
really is.
Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, and there's definitely I know that there's photographers in Australia that will go out of their way to report models for
Mm. Oh,
modeling
I've heard.
without a work visa, and like, come on, man, like, why do you gotta do that?
Yeah. It
But
feels
liquor.
really, out of alignment with what the industry is all about, we're this really niche little community and we should all be supporting each other because we already can be quite vilified by the outside society. And so I really feel that within this niche industry, we should all be supporting each other.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too, and I think those
Yeah.
people that are reporting traveling models for that kind of stuff, they're probably jealous.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, there's something going on there for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something where they feel
Mm.
like they wanna cut somebody else down because that makes them feel good.
I mean, there's a lot of that in this world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Dang, it's almost been an hour, and
I know.
I feel like there's so many more other things that we can talk about.
Yeah.
Are there any Rising Phoenix moments that you wanted to get into that are not modeling related?
Oh. Oh, I hadn't really prepared for that. That's a great question, though. I mean, there have been plenty. We could probably do a whole separate podcast on it, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
totally.
Um, but yeah, what do I want to share on that? Yeah, I've had many. I have a history with DV, and so that's been a really big, continuous rising phoenix moments surrounding that, and I'm really passionate about supporting people that have been or that are moving through DV. And yeah, I'm also a budding parts work facilitator, and that's one modality that I really, really cherish supporting people with moving through anything like that. I mean, I could get further into all of that, but I'm also recognizing that we're nearing the end of our podcast. But I'd be so
Yeah.
happy to jump on another one around all of that as well. Do you
Yeah.
ever do comeback sessions,
You
round
know
two?
what? I have recently started like a similar offshoot type of episode where we do deep dives on
Mm.
things.
Wow.
So like I'll pick a topic with another model and we'll go down the rabbit hole on a certain topic. So the first
Ooh.
one that I did was just like, what is freelance modeling and how is it different than agency modeling and
Wow.
like the history of it and stuff. And in the upcoming future, I have one that is going to go down the rabbit hole on fetish modeling.
Oh, yes.
But I could do one that is involved with like being a trauma survivor
Mm.
uh, and being a model at the same time because that's fucking
One.
hard.
Yep. Yep, especially if you're having an off day and you've got to rock up to a shoot and try to be pretty when you've got
Yeah.
some demons floating around in your head, or you've just come from a sketchy situation. Yeah, I would love to jam on that. And oh, there's so much we could jam on. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, something I would also love to discuss is how this really intersects for me with syncing with my menstrual cycle.
Oh.
I'm studying to be a menstrual cycle coach, and in the near future, I'm looking to combine cycle coaching and pathwork facilitation into a bit of a unique offering. And I mean, this intersects with my modeling life constantly. So it would be awesome to dive into something like that as well.
Dude, yeah. We'll definitely
One.
do another podcast sometime in the next few months.
Yeah,
Like,
incredible.
I wanna go down that rabbit hole with you on, like, the menstrual cycle thing is so interesting
Mhm.
because I haven't been totally in tune with that throughout the course of my life. We can talk about that during that thing, but in
Yeah.
summary, I just wanted to say I think that it's so cool that, like, you take these experiences in your life and you have become leaders in all these different areas of your life. Like, you started your own agency, you're working to help people with their past work, and you're working towards being a mentor, dealing with people's menstrual cycles. So I think it's so
Wow.
cool that you place yourself in these, like, helpful positions where you can guide people through things that were hard for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Christy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I am really allowing those words to land. Thank you.
you're welcome. It's been
Mm.
great. Hey,
It's been
Cheyenne,
fun.
I'll definitely share, like, all of your links. This episode is actually gonna come out tomorrow because I'm super
Woo!
on my recording. I actually didn't get to share an episode last week, so
Okay.
I'll be whipping this out tonight so that it comes out tomorrow.
Oh, so exciting. I can't wait to share with everyone. It's
Heck
gonna be
yeah,
great. Thank
totally.
you so much for having me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure and delight, and I'm looking forward to doing another sometime.
Hell yeah, awesome. Great chatting with you, and I will chat with you very soon after this.
Amazing. See ya.
Bye.